Well, thanks for joining y'all. As you know, we're talking about the Core Nano today, and really the intent of this webinar is to kind of run through some of the features, some of the ways to design around it, how to implement one of the Core Nanos or many of the Core Nanos based on what you need. For those of you who don't know much about Q-SYS, just kind of a brief overview. A Q-SYS Core is our systems processor. It's our central processor for designing your system. Your designs for implementing systems using our platform are built around the core that you choose. So it's based on your network audio needs, your peripheral requirements, connectivity that you need. That list can go on and on. But we have lots of options based on those parameters and what your system requires. And the Core Nano, although it is one of the smaller form factor cores, it does not give up any power. One of the things I equate it to, which is hard to see because of the size here, is it's similar to our 110, which is our Core 110, which is our most popular core. It just doesn't have those I/O that the Core 110 has. So let's take a little step back here and talk about what Q-SYS is. It's our platform. It's our software. It's everything within our ecosystem. And we have our Q-SYS designer software that allows us to map out our hardware offerings and how they communicate when you build a system, while also giving you the ability to talk to other pieces of hardware, whether they're third party or other QSC products. Pretty much anything with a network connection these days we can talk to using our platform. Our equipment uses pretty standard off-the-shelf hardware. This comes down to making it simpler to deploy on networks, making it easier to have those conversations with your IT professionals whenever you tell them you want to stick something on their network, if you're not building your own. This allows us also to run on any kind of network switch just about on the market without any kind of special licensing, any kind of special hardware, anything for devices to communicate. They're all built around the network standards, IEEE standards. So all cores and peripherals can be tied to our Reflect Manager. For managing this hardware, it's accessible through the internet. Once you have that tied in, you have the ability to remotely manage your customers' systems, and that becomes pretty powerful when you're talking about lots of customers or lots of locations. Being able to roll all those into a web interface where you can remotely access them helps with a lot of different options in supporting your customers. The beautiful thing about our product line is the one software to talk to every device, to communicate with every device, to configure every device, to build your UCI, to build your scripts for controlling systems and other hardware. It's all done in one place. Same goes with firmware. That's all done in one place. You use our new software, our newest version of software. The firmware is baked into that. So when you push that file out to your hardware, all your firmware is updated on your hardware as well. It's a pretty intuitive design, I must say. Third-party plugins, we have partnerships with other manufacturers. We have partnerships with integrators and other folks that are working with us alongside us and on their own to build plugins for third-party applications. We have quite a few now, but there are more to come. We're constantly rolling out new ones that make it easier to integrate with other systems. So this is Q-SYS. So we're going to talk about the Core Nano, what you came here to hear about. So here's our Core Nano, it's a half RU, 1 RU space, half RU for a rack space there. You can see here on the back what some of the connection options here. This, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of equate this to our most popular core in terms of its ability. So you don't have the audio I/O or the GPIO that you get with the Core 110, but we have peripheral devices that can help you make up for those if you need them. But in terms of its raw capability and power, it's very similar to the 110, and you throw a couple licenses on there and you have all of the same network streaming options that you have with the 110 in terms of channel count. You can get the same number of AEC channels whenever you're using microphones in soft conference or soft phone applications. Using that collaboration license, you can get up to the same number of Dante channels with the software license for the Dante upgrade. So you have a lot of options there that make this box very similar to the 110. And as most of y'all know, the 110 has been hard to come by lately. So if you're designing and you're not sure, this Nano a lot of times can fill that gap where the 110 isn't available if you partner it with the right hardware. And a little bit later on, we're going to talk about the peripheral devices that we have that also give you the flexibility and on-ramping and off-ramping audio. Just like our really any core that we have, we've got the dual NICs on here, so you can run on an isolated network. If you have a separate AV network from a corporate network that you need to be a part of, you have that option with the dual NICs. That can also be run for redundancy. If you need to have redundant systems running, you can set it up that way as well. It's a pretty good layout there. With the dual USB, both of those ports can be host devices to connect to any of our peripherals. If you're doing, say, a soft codec application where you're using our camera, maybe you're using one of our NVs for video transmission, there's some different options there, but you can use both of those USB ports independent of one another. So a lot of applications where we see this, and we'll touch on some designs later on during this webinar, but the functions that I have seen work well with those two USB ports is maybe you have a dedicated room computer that's using one of the ports, and then you have a guest input that you want to use the other port. You have those two on that one box that give you that option, and that USB-B will auto switch and take over from the USB-C. So you just know your guest input basically uses that USB-B, and it will always take over the C port, disconnecting it and giving access to that guest computer. So there's a lot of thought that went into this box, and although small, it packs a punch, that's for sure. So here's a kind of a look at our scaling licenses I touched on briefly. So you can see in that left column there the base configuration that you get with the Core Nano. You get the 64 channels of network audio. You get the dual soft phone instances that you can run, 8 AEC channels you can have, up to 3 of our network microphones. As you scale up, you can look there, you've got your collaboration license and your commercial license, and depending on which one you go with, you get some more features added to the processing of the core. You can stack those together, so you can actually use both on the same core. If you need, say you needed 4 instances of soft phone and you need all those media network channels, you could use both, and you could get that. Maybe you needed more peripherals and you needed AEC, something like that. You have some flexibility there. The peripherals are probably my biggest thing with the Nano. That's really where you hit a wall with limiting what the Nano can do, and that's just based on the limitations there. But 48's quite a few. I've definitely helped with some designs with some of the local integrators where we're using Nanos to run several rooms, and really our limitation was the peripheral limit. Once we realized, okay, well, we're doing X number of rooms, we have this many peripherals per room, we can do 9 rooms or whatever it is. So you have a lot of flexibility still. So let's talk about audio now. So in our with all of our cores, we have a lot of flexibility in being agnostic. I don't know why we still have the CobraNet and AVB on here, but those are not something that you see on a Core Nano, obviously. But we did have those cards for our Core 510. We had the card slots on that where we could have CobraNet AVB supported on the device. Some of our newer hardware here that is much more applicable, I think, working with the Nano is our QIO audio expanders. So these allow on-ramping and off-ramping of audio. As you can see, we have 3 different flavors here. We have a 4-input version, a 4-output version, and then a 2x2 version where we get both 2 input, 2 output. These are small quarter space 1 RU units, so you could put 4 of them. We have a rack shelf for it. You could put 4 of them in a rack if you needed to. They also have under table mount attachments for them, so you can mount them under a table or in a credenza or wherever you need them. There's lots of options. You notice there's a LAN loop through on it as well as power loop through. So this works in a couple ways. You've got the ability to PoE power these if you single home run to each one, which would work just fine. Would eat up more network ports though. So what you can do is you can actually daisy chain your 4 in a row via network, and then buy one of our power supplies and daisy chain the power through as well. And that would prevent you from eating up as many network ports, just because we don't have the ability to pass the PoE through those ports based on the design. But essentially, these will work like any input that you would have on a Core 110 or a card slot on a 510. Anything you're used to seeing in the designer software, these are going to just be another peripheral device that you're dropping in. Nice thing is you can expand, right? If you need them later, if you need to add something later, you have the ability to add more as you see fit. So this little drawing kind of shows how you might use a couple of our units that you're using maybe with a gooseneck microphone where you're driving logic and you need to you also need to get that audio back to a core. You've got the ability to use maybe our GP 8x8 box that has contact closures on it, or their digital IOs on it, and then you've got the ML4. And we obviously haven't talked about the logic boxes that we have, but the audio there is being shown. So this might be a typical design, maybe something y'all have seen before, where you have multiple microphones and you're running audio cable, you're running power cable, so you can, or multi-strain cable, so you can power your LEDs and drive the logic with those LEDs. Now, if you go with something like our new Nmt1 mic, you have the option to stick it on the network and have it function in place of something like those gooseneck microphones. So the Nmt1 is a Q-SYS native microphone. You have multi-elements built into it, and it's fully programmable. There's a ton of function that we don't have to dive too deep into right now, but the premise is this could take the place of a gooseneck microphone. So like we saw in that previous drawing, now you're just talking about having a couple of network drops back and covering that same space. And if you guys would excuse me for a second, give me just a second.
Actually, while Coy's taking a break, I'm actually gonna answer a question real quick that came up, and it's one that's kind of worth going into. On one of the slides earlier where we were talking about the scaling license, we cover very briefly that you can have a certain number of AEC processors, and then you can also have Nmt1 microphones. So the Nmt1 microphone block, when you bring that in, and this is something that we'll dive deeper into when the mic is actually out, which I believe is going to be 9.7 now. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but the Nmt1 block actually has AEC built into it, so you don't run that through a separate AEC processor. The AEC processor is just for either Dante mics or analog mics or something like that. So that's why there's kind of a sliding scale when you get into having a bunch of NMT1s and then trying to use some other microphones. It probably won't be, well, I know that it won't be that you can do 6 NMT1s and 16 AEC processors, because your NMT1s are already going to take up AEC processing as well. I believe that is still getting hammered out. We'll know more about exactly how those ratios work, because the NMT1 only comes in as 4 channels. But there's also some extra processing that goes on to make the NMT1 work. So we'll know more about exactly how that's going to shake out once we get closer and we start testing 9.7 and we start seeing builds of 9.7 and can actually see how the processing usage goes, we'll be able to do, we will certainly do a whole deep dive on the NMT1 once that comes out. It'll either be part of a what's new in 9.7, or we'll do one specially by itself. Just depends on how much information there is. It'll probably be by itself because there's a lot going on inside that. I have one here in my lab. I have one of our prototypes, and there's kind of a lot to, you know, to digest on the way it works. So it's a sliding scale is the short answer to that question, as far as the number of NMT1s and then the number of just basic AEC processing channels that you can have. So
have you played with that much, Steve, in regards to the, I know there's a setting in there, I was playing with it earlier in the summer, where you can like set there's like a pickup range or like a spectrum that it will use for the way the beam forming is working, that affects the way the AEC works too.
Well, and that's one of the other things is, I'm not 100% sure if it changes based on the number of lobes that you have, or the number, how many of the quadrants you have active. I'm assuming that for planning purposes, you need to just plan on the fact that you're going to have all 4 of them active at any given time. Like on mine, I only run one of the quadrants because it sits, you know, 3 feet away from me on my desk, and I don't want every little noise that I make getting picked up from the back.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I recall there being a setting that had something to do with the way the beam forming works specifically, because I couldn't compile a file with an analog mic that we were messing with, and it was because we had too much we needed like a collab license to get more AEC is what it was. And it was based on one of those properties, but I haven't looked at it in a couple months. So I don't remember exactly the setting.
Yeah, there's a beam orientation, and that really just has to do with, is the beam centered on the microphone button, or does it exist between the 2 buttons? So there's an orientation that you can change, and then there is the typical AEC tail length that you can adjust as well. So I mean, you can have it as a 200 milliseconds, or let's see, I think it's 1, 2, 3, or 400. So that'll change, you know, the amount of processing that it requires as well. So,
yeah.
But yeah,
Gotcha.
we'll dig into all that fun stuff when the time comes.
Yeah, so that'll be, I agree though. I think we'll probably end up doing one just on that whenever it comes out. It has a lot to it. So as I mentioned, we're talking about replacing, you know, a gooseneck basically with this, or it could be a table mic in a conference room. This was just a quick design we threw together as a contrast to your typical analog setup. And you know, just depending on your system, this might be a better option for you. While we're talking about audio, obviously we've got some new lines of speakers here that we're showing. Because the Nano doesn't have any analog I/O on it, you could potentially use our PoE line of speakers, our network loudspeaker line here that come in the different flavors there, ceiling, pendant, and we've got a sound bar. You know, the nice thing is your native devices, right? You're not worried about any kind of scaling needed for Dante or anything like that. You have that using these speakers, them being QLAN. You're just, obviously you're using your network streamed counts, but you're full, you got full control of those, full monitoring of those as you would any of our other QLAN devices. They kind of run with that same, all 3 of these, the way I understand it, they run with the same sound profile as our AD series of speakers. So if you had to mix and match, say you had an analog zone and you just didn't have enough juice to hit those last 2 drops or the last 1 or whatever it was, and you do something like this, these can marry up with the AD series speakers pretty nicely without any kind of noticeable difference. They being that they are a QLAN device, they have the typical ID button on them, so you can identify them in software. You can turn on and off the LEDs that are built into them as well. That soundbar is a great little PoE speaker. I'm really impressed with what that thing outputs. for the size of it. And each one would require a home run. There's no daisy chaining these, unfortunately. Here's a new one that many people probably haven't seen. We just announced and talked about this one a little bit in our Activate last week, but this is one we did tease a little bit at InfoComm. But this is our SPA-Q amplifier, which is a QLAN amplifier, network amplifier here that has some flex channels on it. So a very, very cool box when you're talking about marrying this up with a Nano that doesn't have any analog I/O. Now you've got the ability to send your audio from the Nano to a power amplifier, and you also have those flex channels that can be inputs or outputs for your system. So you could bring in a computer, bring in a codec, whatever it is. It could those could be used for in or out. I see we have one excited patron. We are all very excited about the SPA-Q here, and I don't, and maybe it came up as a side topic at some point before InfoComm, but I didn't even know we were going to have it at InfoComm, and all of a sudden it was just laying out, and so we all got to see a real working one, and I think one even got hooked up at one point, but I think we had two floating around. Let's see. Video. All right, so this slide has a lot to offer on it. I apologize. It's kind of cluttered here. Need to clean this one up. So we have a lot of different options for video. Obviously, if you're talking about video extension or transmission over a network, we're talking about our NV platform. If you're talking about cameras, we have our new NC line of cameras. The PTZ line is going away. We also have our NC110, our new wide field of view camera. That's a kind of a smaller form factor for those smaller rooms where you maybe have the furniture butted up to a wall or closer to the wall, or just need that really wide shot. So the NV32 is kind of a monster in and of itself. It does a lot. It can be a core standalone by itself. It can be a network video encoder to on-ramp sources onto a network. It can be a decoder to pull them off the network. It has USB bridging built into it. So if you're using it as an encoder, you have the ability to bring in HDMI to the system and bring in your USB all on one unit. Additionally, if it's set up as a decoder, you can still use the USB on it to on-ramp audio. So lots of cool options there. We won't go too deep into that, but you could marry that up with a Nano running as your core, and you have the ability to bring your video into the mix, as well as using any of the other peripheral devices, such as the cameras, for instance, or the Nmt1 microphone we just got done talking about. You have all those options under the umbrella, and using it with an NV or using it with an I/O USB bridge, you have the ability to tie those all together. So in addition to audio and video, what else do we have? Control, we've got touch panels. So we launched our new line of touch panels earlier this year. This is our Gen 3 model. These things are beastly. We just announced with our Activate a scaling license that we're going to offer that utilizes the USB port built into the side of these touch panels, because they have enough horsepower that they can actually act as your USB bridge, which is a really cool option when you start thinking about maybe a room where you just have audio and you don't need video. You want a touch panel, maybe you're controlling some elements of the room, the lights, the HVAC, maybe you're controlling shades, you're not doing any kind of video routing or camera routing or anything like that. You could plop a touch panel in the room that has USB on it. Now you have the ability to add USB bridging at some point if you need it. So lots of options there. 5-inch, 7-inch, 10-inch are the options that we have. They are available to run in portrait mode, or they can run in landscape mode. You can get a tabletop kit for them. They can all be wall mounted, obviously. And then we've got the Axon C1, which is kind of a simplified controller there. It's a basic controller that can trigger some actions. You can drive some faders if you want to control volume. So it's kind of a more simple option, but gives you some more control expansion if you don't need all the bells and whistles of a touch panel. Again, it's going to live natively on the network and communicate with the Nano like any of our other devices. So we talked about the QIO audio a little bit earlier. Here's our QIO control boxes. So these are on the streets now. You have access to all these. We talked about the GP 8x8 a little bit, using our digital IO for driving some relays or some LEDs for a microphone. We also have an IR model here, as well as a serial model that, again, work in the same fashion as the audio. You can daisy chain the network, you can individually PoE power them, you can daisy chain the power if you need to. But again, these essentially work the same way as they do on our cores that have them. So your serial is going to work like a serial port. You're going to have 4 options in your file to bring those in. The GPIO will work the same way. You drag them in, configure them for what you need them to do. And the IR is a little bit different. So the IR's got 4 outputs and 1 input. So you can drive you can drive a display, a source to control it. You could also take IR in if you just had, say, some remote, whatever it was, and you can use that logic, the IR coming in, to drive some other logic in your system. So maybe it's a backup if the touch panel goes down and they need a way to turn the system on. You could do something like that. So pretty cool little box, lots of options. It has access to the database. If you're familiar with the global cache, that same IR database that they have will be, or is accessible to pull from different devices that you might control with IR. So we touched on some of the licensing earlier. I'll briefly touch on these here for the control side. We've got our UCI license, which you would need if you had to deploy a touch panel at any kind of user interface, whether you're running it on a computer, you're running it on an iPad, or you're running it on one of our touch panels. In order to write a UCI file and load it to a core, you need that license. Same thing goes for our scripting license. Our scripting license gives you the ability to use our block controller, use the ability to write a custom script yourself, or to use any of our plugins. So again, same thing. If you want to use those in a file functioning on a core, you need the license loaded to the core. And then we've got a Teams license, which is just those two wrapped up together. That was something that came with getting certified with Microsoft Teams. So it was a package that we offer. But if you bought a Microsoft Teams license, you don't also need to buy the other two. And likewise, if you buy the UCI and the scripting, you don't need to buy the Teams license. We'll touch on some integration here. So I talked briefly about third-party plugins, working with other manufacturer partners to drive plugins, to drive control, to drive market awareness. Even you can kind of see some of these names here. These are companies that we work closely with, that we are partners with, that we integrate well with. They're a big part of our business, as much as we like to think we're a part of theirs. But we partner with those folks. The idea is to get more people working with the platform to make it more user friendly for everyone, for the integrator, for the end user. So we've kind of gone through all some of the different pieces and peripherals. There's a lot more, obviously, that we could talk about. I want to go through some system designs using a Nano and what that might look like, some different types of functionality, whether it be conferencing or just control, things like that. This first drawing is just a control drawing. So you can see we've got just our Core Nano there living in an equipment rack. My mouse here, shown as just being on a network switch in an equipment rack. And then we can see these couple of conference rooms here look like they have some control. We've got room HVAC control for a couple of those, and maybe we're doing some display control, it looks like, with those serial QIO boxes, which are on the network. We've got a GP 8x8 here driving some shades in this room. You can see we've got a tablet shown in this room. So just some different options there. If you're just doing control, you're not doing audio, this box will work for you. It's just a matter of probably just getting comfortable with our platform. But ultimately, you can drive your system control without the need of audio or video to be a piece of that using this Core Nano. The next drawing here is a little bit more in depth. Sorry, Steve, are you answering? It looks like there's a question here. Looks like you're
chewing through them as fast as I can.
Okay, no, you're fine. My little window here stayed popped up, so I didn't know if another one came up, or I don't know why this guy won't hide. But
we got lots of them today. Oh, I'm actually, if you're looking at Gino's, I'm actually in the middle of answering his.
Yeah, I see that. It's just this bar is covering up some of my window.
Oh,
I don't even know if y'all can see it or not, but I didn't know if it was because there were questions coming in. I thought maybe we had a lively group today. Looks like we've had a few questions that I missed, but
yeah, that's all right. I've been churning through them.
Cool. No, I appreciate it. If there's any that you want to bring live, please.
I may, if we have a few minutes when we're done going through the deck, I may just roll through some of them because some of them may be some questions other folks have. But everybody should be able to see them. Once I answer them, they should be available for everybody to see.
Cool. Yeah, and we can. We've only got a couple slides left, so we're just, we're on track here, so we can certainly thumb through them. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Y'all can't see what's blocking the top of my screen, I guess. So anyway, so in this design here, we can see the Nanos kind of being flexed a bit more. So same deal. We've got a Core Nano on a rack. It's running with our collaboration bundle scaling license. And then we've got a QIO there shown to be driving a wireless microphone, maybe for that larger room, and then the SPA amplifier, the analog amplifier. Driving the 6 speakers in that room out of the audio output of that ML2x2 QIO peripheral. But we can see what we've got going on here is 4 individual rooms. So up here, we'll start at the top left here. We've got this kind of like small huddle room. It's using our sound bar with our NC110 wide field of view camera there. We've got a USB bridge and a touch panel microphone in there. So we're just doing some audio video conferencing there. If you see, we've also got our NL series, network loudspeaker series, PoE speaker in there too. So minimal footprint in the rack, but lots of flexibility in these rooms here. You can see as we move to the next room, we're just doing kind of an audio only thing, but we show the camera sound bar in there, could all be living on this. So I would imagine the reason I stuck the collaboration bundle license is because we probably exceed the 8 AEC channels that come standard with the Nano in this design. But with that scaling license, we can add microphones and not have to worry about, oh, my core doesn't have enough AEC processing. As we move to that big room there, you can see we've got the dual camera set up. We've got the NV series as an encoder and decoder driving the displays and connection from the laptop along with the Nmt1 on the table there, or the Nmt. It looks like we chopped off some text when we made this slide. But as you can see, this core is very capable of driving these systems without any issues. And I didn't count the peripherals, but I imagine we're well under 32 in this design, that it wouldn't be an issue at all. And I think that's accurate because this next one's got a bunch of stuff, and I think this one hits 31 peripherals. So we didn't need the license. So when we designed this one, I think one of the tasks was, let's see how far we can go without using any licenses using a Nano. So this is a pretty busy room, but we can kind of go through it. It's a two-way divisible room that also has the ability to rotate and be set up long ways for maybe a different kind of presentation. So you've got cameras everywhere, you've got speakers everywhere, microphones everywhere. One of the cool things about the microphone that we have shown in this design, that ceiling microphone, is the Sennheiser TCC2, which is a fantastic ceiling microphone. I'll plug them for a second because I love telling people this. That microphone uses 1 channel of AEC and covers a massive range of space. It works with plugins that we have. It works with our automatic camera preset recall plugin. It's a fantastic microphone, and it uses 1 channel of AEC. So as you can see, if you deploy one of those and maybe need to run 4 or 5 rooms using that microphone, you can use a Nano and drive pretty large systems with a microphone that'll cover a whole room using one AEC channel, which just opens up that core to be what you need it to be. But in this design, I think we landed it at 31 peripherals, all driven off that single core in the rack there. As you can see, the lectern's got microphone on it. We've got an NV there. We've got wireless microphones. We've got lots of peripherals. So that Nano is very powerful. I've been designing with it for a while. Prior to joining the team here, I was designing with it, and it's only gotten better with the way that our licensing has rolled out, the features we've added in the licensing, the abilities we're adding to the box through just software updates is incredible. So it's a very capable unit. I highly recommend it. I'd encourage you to reach out to your local salespeople, your local apps engineer, whoever it is that you ask questions to if you've got any. That wraps us up for this presentation. I'm happy to take questions if y'all have any. Happy to answer any off-topic questions if you have those as well. I'll hang around for a little bit. I don't know what Steve's schedule is, but since we're a few minutes short here, I'm happy to hang for a while and answer any questions if y'all have any. If Steve, if you've got some questions I can read through, if you want to answer, I haven't even looked at them yet. We certainly can do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of questions about SPA-Q, one of them regarding a standalone mode. I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't even know that CXQs actually have a standalone mode where you can use them. I mean, it requires a core to load to them the first time, but you can put them in a standalone mode where you route one or many or all of the inputs on the back of it directly to the outputs. What makes this unique is that if you load speaker voicings onto it, those are actually retained. Those actually do get loaded to a small DSP processor that's on the amplifier. I've done this before when in the middle of doing a transition project. Somebody's got another system, they're going to roll it to a Q-SYS system, but we want to start putting amps in. We would get CXQs, put them in standalone mode, and then have them installed so that they could use them on the existing system. And then 2, 3, 4, 6 months down the road, when we actually get the PO to start upgrading the system and putting Q-SYS in, we already had CXQ amps, and then we would just roll them over once we had a core in. But the question was about, will SPA-Q be able to do that? The answer is sort of. You will be able to send the inputs directly to the outputs and use it without a core, but there's a couple of caveats on that. There won't be, you won't be able to do speaker voicings like you will on CXQ, and it probably won't do that right when we first start shipping them. That will probably be something that'll get added in firmware down the road a little bit. So it will, while you can kind of sort of just use it as an analog amp, kind of hanging off the end, it's not going to be quite as full featured as CXQ will. Because CXQ, you can also have failover into standalone, which is another cool feature if you're using a QLAN network, and should something go wrong with your network and the amplifier loses connection back to the core, you can have it fail into a standalone mode, where if you have something just wired into, you know, analog number 1, it would just come out of every output. So it's not ideal, but it's better than having dead air. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that, yeah, and I don't think a lot of people know about some of those features built for redundancy. Ultimately, I think is what those are for, right?
Yeah. I mean, the use case of using them in the middle of a transition is just kind of something that I came up with. I did a bunch of like casino projects and stuff like that, and sometimes it would take a while to get them to fully commit to changing over all of their gear. but they already had a couple of amps that were out that they wanted to change over. They didn't want to have to buy them twice. So we just would sell them 6 or 8 amps, put them in standalone mode until time came to actually get them onto a Q-SYS system.
Yeah.
There was another question about NV video. A couple of them as it came around. First was about USB-C connections, ingesting video off of a PC. They will not do that. They are not like Thunderbolt UC or USB-Cs. They will do the audio and video bridging. They'll get you video from the system to the PC, or camera video from the system to the PC, and you can get audio back from it. You just can't get video from a PC at this point. I think the other question was about getting NV video onto either a G3 panel or into or down the video bridging. That is a roadmap item that will be one of the sooner rather than later kind of things. We recently, in whatever this was, we just put out 9.6. We just put out, sorry. When you get into future versions, it all becomes a blur.
9.6 isn't out yet, is it? I think 6 is coming out in a week or two.
Okay, there we go. So 5 just came out.
Yeah,
this is where we live. I live somewhere between 5 and 7. Anyway, so on 5 that just came out, we recently added the feature that we can put our camera video out of USB or out of HDMI #1 on an NV32 for feeding hard codecs or recorders or anything like that. The next step on that is to be able to manipulate NV video outside of the NV sphere. That will include potentially putting it on panels as preview, as well as being able to push it down the bridges, down the video bridges. So that's the next step on that, from what I understand. I'll put my asterisk, which is subject to change, but
subject to change every time.
Yeah, I mean, the software developers are working overload right now, trying to get through everything that we want to get done for 9.7 and eventually 9.8 and 9.6 and blah 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 blah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
There was a question about a quantity of NLSB 42s for a room. Probably need a little more detail to give you a good answer on that. Just depends on use case.
Also, I would have to run this through my decoder ring of 8 meter by 6 meter.
35 by 25 -ish.
I can barely handle. Well, it's 3.3, so yeah. I don't know. I can barely handle things in feet.
I rounded up.
I know 6 meters is 20 feet, so I'm assuming this is roughly a like 30 foot by 20 foot by 30 foot room. I will say this: I did a meeting the other day personally. This was for a group that I'm involved with outside of Q-SYS. And the room was, I would say, probably about 14 feet by 20 feet, more or less, kind of, sort of. And I had one SB42 sitting, like I brought a little rack of gear and a camera, and we tied into a TV in the room. And I had an Nmt1 sitting in the middle of the table. And I had one SB42 in that room, and nobody had trouble hearing. So I would think that in a 20 by 30-ish kind of room, if you took a pair of them and mounted them vertically and put them on either side of the panel, that would probably do it. Especially if you're running them PoE plus, because don't forget, you get double the power by going from PoE to PoE plus. You go from 12 watts to 24 watts of power. I mean, I have an SB42 here in my office, and there are plenty of times when I'm either in my kitchen or in my living room, and I am either playing music, or like if I'm in a call and I go out to get something to drink, I can still hear it pretty well in my kitchen. So they cover quite well for being what they are. I've been very impressed by them.
We had a training in Florida about 3-4 weeks ago, and we used one of those in a room about that size, and it was ample. It was plenty. It was probably 20 to 25 feet wide and about 30 to 40 feet long or deep, where everybody was sitting, and we used one NLSB42. And it was substantial. I mean, you could obviously, if you don't have PoE plus, you could go with 2 of them. If you do have PoE plus, you could go with 2 of them just to have a little more juice if you need it. But they do put out quite a bit more than you would expect from just a PoE speaker. They are substantial, and that goes with any of the NL line of speakers. Honestly, we have heard them, we have played with them, we've tested them. They work well. And they do a good job of substituting for that. I mean, right, you're substituting an amp channel, you're substituting analog to speaker or mic to line to speaker level conversion, all of that. You're getting all of that done in one form factor. And thinking about the cost, it comes in at the same price as buying a speaker and an amp, one channel amp. I mean, you're generally not doing that. Most of the time you're buying a couple channel amps, but the breakdown is good. The coverage is fantastic. And they put out quite a bit of sound.
Yeah, there was another question in here about sizes of NV. We've mentioned this before, but the NV32 was the first iteration into our network video offerings. There will certainly be smaller form factors as we move down the road. With supply chain and everything else being what it is right now, we're not moving quite as quickly as perhaps we would have hoped. But I can tell you for certain that the plan and the roadmap for our network video offerings will certainly involve smaller form factors. I haven't seen anything super definite right now, but I can tell you for sure that at some point we will probably have a 2-in 1-out, and then for sure some kind of a single channel endpoint. I don't know about getting bigger. I guess that would just have to depend on market demands and things like that. I don't know about having anything that would go
we don't even
necessarily
get unless there's a good use case for going bigger.
I mean, the 3 comes from the typical setup of a conference room, which is a BYOD, a wireless presentation, and an MTR or some sort of a dedicated UC compute. That's where the number 3 came from. And obviously the 2 outputs comes from dual display. So that's where the number 3 for the input side came from. We don't see a ton of conference rooms that are doing more than 3. I mean, I'm not suggesting that there aren't any. I'm sure there are plenty of them that do. I think 3 was just kind of a good median number without having people essentially paying for inputs that they don't need. The box is not inexpensive. So yeah, I think that's how it will phrase, or I think it'll work. Is there anything in your solution? This is a great question. Is there anything in your solution from today that will have long lead times or won't be released soon? Other than SPA-Q and the Nmt1. The Nmt1 is, I believe, slated for 9/7, which should be by the end of the year. Which I mean, oddly enough, by the end of the year is not even considered a long lead time by today's standards.
Right.
The SPA Q is probably spring. I think they're still working that out from a hardware and a software side. Nanos are a stock item right now. I believe NV32s are a stock item right now. Touch panels are a stock item right now. I think I should probably look before I just start spouting off what is and isn't a software.
PoE speakers show to be available. Any of our PoE speakers?
Yeah. So yeah, PoE speakers are
in terms of the SPA, the SPA-Q amp, orderable November, probably shipping somewhere late in the winter, February timeframe.
Cool. As far as the rest of it goes, touch panels are about a month out right now, it looks like.
Same with the QIO, about a month out.
Same thing with the QIOs. So kind of, sort of.
And a month isn't crazy though. I mean, if you're planning a project going, okay, I mean, obviously some people need stuff now, but a month out's, like you said, end of year doesn't even sound that daunting anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when if somebody told you that it was going to take you 3 months to get something, you'd have lost your mind.
Yeah.
But not so much anymore. And yes, I agree, Derek. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, so yes, a lot of this, most of the stuff that we showed, again, other than the SPA Q and the Nmt1, those we still don't have real firm dates on yet. In fact, I don't even think Nmt1 shows up on any of our stuff yet. So
no, it just shows orderable end of this month, beginning of October. I mean, if it's slated for 9/7, then obviously people got to start get their orders in. So
yeah.
Well, if there are no other questions, we can call it. Give you guys a few minutes back. We went through that pretty quickly today. So please reach out if you have any questions from us. Reach out to your local sales folks, apps engineers. We're here to help. Hope y'all have a great rest of the week.
Bye, everybody.
Here.